In this video, we'll be talking with Ben Garvey of Common Paper. We'll be talking about what Common Paper do, their API program, and most critically, why they chose Zuplo to accelerate their API program and time to market. Welcome, Ben Garvey. Hey, Ben, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Ben, co-founder and CTO of a company called Common Paper. I'm a software engineer. I've worked at a bunch of startups the last decade or so, including RJ Metrics, Magento, was at Adobe for a little while, and then Betterment before Common Paper.
Nice. And so Common Paper, I have to flag that Zuplo is a customer and a user of Common Paper's awesome open source work. And I think we pay for the product as well. Tell us a little bit about Common Paper and what you're working on there.
Yeah, so Common Paper is a open source platform for contracts. So what we're trying to do, we've made open source standard agreements that anyone could use. You go to our website, and you can download commercial contracts for NDAs, CSAs, DPAs, partnership agreements, all kinds of stuff. And we have a platform for making it really easy to create these contracts, to negotiate them in the app, send them to your customers, and get them signed fast. And what it does, it sort of takes you, because what happens is the startup will will raise money on a safe or some standard agreement, but when they go to send their first contract out to a customer, they're stuck in the dark ages of emailing Word docs back and forth, and we're trying to save time and everyone's money. Because think about open source libraries get released every day with open source licenses, and that's kind of our inspiration. And no one talks to a lawyer to release something on Apache 2 or GPL or any of these licenses. NDAs should be the same way, right? CSAs, MSAs should be the same way.
Yeah. So, and actually, just to make this real, for us, we originally started talking to our fancy legal company, who shall remain nameless, to do our first contract when we got a first big customer. And spoiler, we didn't even end up using it because we used the CSA, the Cloud Services Agreement from Common Paper. They charged us several $1,000s just for the prep work on that, even though we didn't go forward with it. And so, a huge time saver, huge simplifier, and money saver. So yeah, we're big fans of what you
Sure, and
folks are working on.
you can save money in the creation of these documents, which is helpful. But also too, it's just a lot of it is as you because if you've already built that agreement, then you can sort of use it in the future. But if you have a standard agreement, one of the biggest hurdles for sales teams is how to close deals faster. And what happens is you'll find the customer, everyone agrees to what they're selling and buying, and then all of a sudden you will hit that legal review phase where both sides are looking at that contract and everything's kind of grinds to a halt. If we can shorten that time period up by having standard agreements that people have already seen before, it makes it really easy because the terms are all immutable. You can sort of just play with the variables in the contract, sort of like how long it's enforced for, what the order terms are, and some of the stuff that's selectable. So you can't just change a random word in the middle of the contract. All the variables are all up front, up top, and you can sort of scan it and review it quickly.
Awesome. So yeah, 100% on that. And I remember a little while ago, actually, because it's sort of your structured approach to contracts. I think one of your taglines on your website was like an API for contracts or legal. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because my co-founder Jake and I came from a bunch of data startups. We're data people through and through, and we always felt like we were building these data products for the future that everyone's using now. We're, Meanwhile, our lawyers are still like emailing the Word docs back and forth, and we always felt like that there has to be like a better way for this, right? And so Jake had this idea that we have these contracts that are like artifacts of the deal, right? That you sort of sign this contract, and then someone puts it into a Dropbox folder somewhere, and then someone takes those contract terms and types them into a billing system somewhere, or types them into CRQ or whatever business systems get run on that contract. It's separated. That contract is actually separated from it. We think that contract should be the thing that actually drives all those business systems, right? You should be able to query it like a database and have this application interface into the contract itself. And so Jake, a couple years ago, wrote this blog post that contracts should be APIs, and it should be eliminating the waste and all through that process. We should use contracts not as just artifacts of this deal, but actually the thing that powers it. And so we've created these standard agreements, but also kept all this structured data. So any of the data that you have signed in a contract with us or on our platform, it's not just crammed into a Dropbox folder or a Google Drive folder. It's actually stored in a Postgres database, in a relational database, and we have all the information there. And so you can sort of query that data out like a database. And so last week we released a new API that's powered by Zuplo that lets people do that. So you can sort of take all you can grab all the agreement data. You can look at the statuses of them. So if you're doing like sales pipeline optimization or anything like that, that's great. But also you can take it and you can sort of use it as like, so if let's say you wanted to send sensitive documents to someone like a SOC 2 report or the results like of a penetration test, and you want to have an NDA in place, right? So the way that sort of compliance works today is like someone has to go and tell you or check that there's an NDA in place, right? So, but that's not really easy to do if it's enforced in software. Still, there's some human involved. Whereas if you had a record in our database that says there's an NDA in place, it was signed on this date, it's effective for 2 years, today's this date, so I can sort of build this query up that can tell you if there's not just an NDA in place, but there's one still in effect today that hasn't expired. You can sort of build that query into this system that would send a SOC 2 report. It would check for the NDA first. If the NDA wasn't in place, it could send the NDA to the person that was supposed to send the SOC 2 report, wait for that signature request to come back in a webhook, and then sort of release that sensitive document, like I said, a SOC 2 report or a pen test, to that user. And so you can for compliance reasons, you can ensure that thing doesn't go out unless the NDA is in place and in effect.
Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. So you mentioned using Zuplo. Thank you for dropping that in there, which will take us to the next sort of subject. So tell us, what are you using Zuplo for?
Yeah, so we're using Zuplo as the gateway for our API. So it talks to our application, but all the requests get fed through Zuplo. So we have a URL that the DNS points to Zuplo's API, which routes through ours, and it does really great things for us, like we can add security headers and rate limiting and all kinds of stuff that we need to do. And we have a small team. Like, we're a startup, so we have 9 people. If we don't, that 9 people is the whole company, not even 9 people on the engineering team. So we are trying to be lean, and sort of use other products off the shelf when we can take advantage of that, and so we can still move fast. I'd rather have all my engineers working on product stuff as opposed to data infrastructure or security infrastructure whenever we can. And when we can lean on experts like Josh and his team, that always helps us move faster and try to get move as fast as we can. And we're using you guys for like key generation and documentation and stuff like that too. So the new doc site's really great, and we it's makes it really easy to make changes to it.
So actually, I think that's one thing. You're an interesting integration, because you use our developer documentation site for the API specification, but much like Stripe, actually, they sort of follow a similar pattern where they have public API specification, and the API keys aren't integrated into that site, which is a feature we offer. Most of our customers that are using our dev docs and API keys are doing that. But what you folks wanted to do was actually have it integrated into your own console and your own dashboard. Tell me a little bit more about why you wanted to do that, and then actually I think we can give a little demo of your integration, which I think is
that's fine. I think it's like a customer expectations. Like, I think if I was expecting to go to get new keys, I would expect to be going to the app, not the documentation. That's where it would live. So to me, like, having that option, like the flexibility to do it there as opposed to the documentation, was cool. I think I think that's mainly why. The other thing is, like, I think just like the scoping of the keys, I think too, like I think the way that it works now, like it's scoped to an email address, whereas our keys are scoped a little bit differently. They're scoped across the entire org, and we wanted to make sure that that's what we might change that in the future, because I think we're still iterating on this thing. This is the first version of the API, and we might change things later and make it more user based in the future, and that would allow us to maybe do it also in the documentation site. But for now, we just had a different use case. But like, luckily, Zuplo is like flexible enough that we could sort of build it not just the way that Josh here has envisioned it, but like the way our UX designer wants.
Awesome. Well, let's take a look at it. So here it is. So let us get signed in and go and see your app. So I'm clicking on sign in here. I had already signed in with my account. And if I come in, this is your own dashboard then. And so I come into the integration section here. And if I look at API, I see this section. It can leap me out to the actual documentation if I click on that link. But just coming back here, what you've done is I can generate the API key here. And so you're calling our API key service. Is that right?
Yeah, so it just is a pass through the back end. So we make a call to Zuplo, and it generates an API key for us and returns it here. And you can copy it out, and you can set a description for this key is, and so you don't 6 months from now, why you made this key.
You know why you did it? Yeah. So now when I come back here, I'm like, I know I created this for testing in a video, and I will delete this key so nobody goes and abuses my Common Paper account.
Right.
Of course, now it's on screen. But that's pretty slick. So you're storing some of this stuff in your own database, so you know the label and the consumer reference, etc.
Hmm.
It's really slick. It's a nice integration. So thanks. And so when you think about Zuplo, did it how much time do you think it saved you? So you said you could focus on core product. You got a small team. Like you're using us for the developer documentation, using us for API keys. I think you have some rate limits and so on. How much time do you think that saved you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like in some ways, uh, I'm sure it saved time, right? Time is like I'm sure it saves time. I don't. I It's hard for me to quantify it because we, it could have saved us weeks, days. I'm not really sure. The one thing though, like especially the documentation, like it looks good. It's probably better than we would have done out of the box by ourselves. It's more extensive. The fact that it lists all the routes and everything, and we did, and also like the thing I always appreciated too is like we made like tons of like we're our engineering focused company in that we like. We ship fast, like we're deploying all the time, constantly, every day, like 10 times a day, all of us. And so like I really appreciated like when reviewing the documentation that like every time we made a change to it, it automatically built a new branch for us. It automatically built a new version of the doc site so we could like see the changes like almost right away and deployed like really, really fast. And like to me, like I have like three or four things that I really try to focus on to make engineering things fast. Fast deployment is easily one of those things. It's the most underrated of all the things. Like if you have a team that it takes 30 minutes to deploy code, like you will definitely overbuild certain parts of your stack, especially in QA, to make sure that you never release mistakes. But if you can fix it in 10 seconds, then like you can move a lot faster that way. And that the fast deployment part is one that I really appreciated as part of what Zuplo does with the documentation.
Yeah, so this is to be clear. So you've got a couple of things like there's the working copy when you're in development, which
Yeah,
deploys in like typically in sort of milliseconds actually. But
yeah,
and then the actual edge deployments you get are typically live in under 20 seconds from you like triggering
yeah.
the Git commit. You guys use the GitHub integration, right?
Yep, yeah, we're doing everything in source control because we're we want to be able to like not pull our hair out at the end of the day when stuff gets changed and everything. So we want to do it the right way. And I think, but having the like I said, I think like anything under 2 minutes is like reasonably fast deployment. So 20 seconds like just felt like instantaneous, which is great. The other thing is like you guys are very responsive to all questions and like you know there's tons of times when I was trying to figure out how to do something and I just didn't look at the docs enough and you guys answered my questions and or things came up, you're pretty responsive to stuff. So that I really always appreciate that. That's why, I mean, if I had to think of like why number one, why I would recommend somebody Zuplo is like it's that like the service is better than what we'd get somewhere else.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I was just going to ask you to wrap up. So would you recommend Zuplo to other startups and businesses like Common Paper? And what would you say to them? So obviously you've already said
Yeah,
about the service.
yeah, I think it's especially like if especially if you don't have like deep expertise in building APIs, like you start kind of like at the best practice of a lot of stuff, and it makes it really really easy to add new policies if you need to change things. Uh, and that part's been really great. It's like the documentation stuff is fast, and the service is great. So yeah, I definitely recommend it.
Ben, it's been a pleasure chatting with you as always. Thanks for your custom. Thanks for partnering with us, and thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Cool. Yeah, if anyone wants to sign up for Common Paper, just go ahead. We have a pretty generous free tier, and you can send NDAs and send Josh an NDA, and you can work with him too.